Hi, everybody. Hank Linderman here. It's Monday, June 15th. Welcome to Getting Angry. As always, we say getting angry is okay, but we need to use that to focus our determination. We don't want to act like damn fools, but we got a right to be angry over all that's going on in our country right now. You know, someone said to me earlier today, it feels like the whole thing's falling apart, and I understand that. Anyway, my name's Hank Linderman, and I'm running for Congress here in Kentucky's 2nd District. I'm the Democratic nominee, so it's really great to have you here. Um, Here I am. It's a beautiful day here in Falls of Rough, Kentucky, and we got several things to talk about. And I guess let's just get right into it. The first thing I want to talk to you about is voting. Hi, Roy Frazier. Oh, and before I forget, I know Bill McNichol is going to be on here in a second. This is my COVID haircut. It's just getting out of control, isn't it? Oh well. Boy, I'd have been better off leaving it alone. It's the way it goes. Hi, Barbara. How are you? Anyway, Bill McNichol will be here in a minute, asking you all to please the share our Facebook Live, because that helps get our numbers up and that helps us get our message out, which is really important. It's going to be more and more important as things roll on. So I wanted to talk to you all today about, let's start here. I'm going to start, well, let's start with voting. Today is the last day. June 15th is the last day you can register for absentee voting in the state of Kentucky. And here's your instructions right there. So if you are not willing to go to the, hi Nancy, how are you? If you're concerned about getting sick, if you're one of those that really shouldn't expose themselves to anything at all, you need to fill out this, and they'll mail you a ballot that you then have to mail in. It must be postmarked by Election Day, which is June 23rd. So get on it. You better get that out there. Here's some of the election headlines I didn't get a chance to show you on Friday. Hi, Mary. Yes, I did have a great weekend doing much of nothing. Actually, that's not quite true. And Mary, stick around. I'm going to be playing a song since you requested that Mondays be music. Anyway, this is from The Guardian, and they are saying that we are likely to have a catastrophe with our voting. And we, of course, saw what happened in Georgia with their primary. They're still having troubles with that. Here's another headline. They're predicting mass mobilization, or a campaign is preparing mass mobilization should Trump refuse to leave willingly if defeated in November. There's going to be all sorts of things going forward, because never has an election felt so important, and also never has our election process felt so insecure. I talked with, or I was in an online discussion, and there was a claim, or someone actually sent me an email, now I remember. A particular person sent me an email, and he saw that Republicans were arranging to hire, hi Debbie, how are you, 50,000 people to kind of monitor election locations, to monitor poll sites. Now there's a limit as to how close they can get, but can you imagine having 50,000 people show up at polls representing the Republican Party, dressed sort of vaguely in uniforms and perhaps even armed? So I think that's going to be one of the threats that we're going to be facing. Another one we're going to face is long lines at the polls. And especially if you're a person of color, or if you're young and voting from college, you're going to see long lines. So I expect we're going to need to have ways of supporting people that are waiting in lines, with food, with water, with various things that they need done. So I see that coming. And if you think it's not important, this should be a little dose of cold water right here. The GOP sees Trump as just going to have no problem, is going to win. They're thinking a landslide. Now maybe they're being delusional, but that's where their thinking is. So we all need to be really clear about where we stand come this election day. Now I'm going to move over here. So we'll start with, today is Supreme Day. The Supreme Court did a whole bunch of rulings. And the first one is a 6-3 decision on workplace discrimination. So they protected LGBT rights, and those workers. So that's a fantastic thing. The Supreme Court also they refused to hear President Trump's challenge to the state of California's sanctuary cities, which I believe it means that it's legal for state officials in California to refuse to help when immigration officials want to track down people who may be in the United States illegally. So the sanctuary cities idea apparently is still intact. And by the way, Mary, back to you're right. If you suspect anyone's armed, you're instructed to call the police. I think what they'll probably do is stay, 100 feet? Or is it 100 yards, 50 yards or something away from the polling place? But just by their presence being outside there, that could be a problem. Supreme Court also refused to listen to arguments about gun rights cases, and there were 10 of them, apparently. Check this out. A slew of cases this is blocking these Second Amendment activists who seek to expand the rights of gun owners. Hi, Jim. Jim Wilson is here. He says, predicting a big win is classic old school politics for several reasons. Yes, absolutely. So this is great news. The Supreme Court this was a big day for the Supreme Court, so fantastic news. Let me go back here and look at you all. One of the things we talked about is the contract for rural America. Let's look at it again. I'm going to read these off. Restoring health care in rural America, education and child care, support for small subsistence and family farms, rebuilding America's infrastructure and domestic supply chain. Number 5, a living wage. 6, support for workers in declining industries. 7, renewable rural energy, water, wind, and solar. 8, rural broadband. 9, abuse prevention, rehabilitation, and support. And that's the one we're going to be talking about, by the way. 10, legalization of cannabis. And 11, a Secretary of Rural Affairs. So I want to talk about abuse prevention, rehab, and support. So unfortunately, Kentucky was hit very hard with the opioid epidemic. And some of that is based on the idea that in the late 90s, and those of us that are old enough to remember it, will remember a bunch of ads that were on the television saying that they've identified one of the signs of life is pain. And if you're in pain, that's a problem, and it keeps you from healing quickly enough. And they were saying, we've got ways of dealing with pain. We have this whole new class of drugs we're going to have you use, and you can't be addicted. And these, of course, were the OxyContins and the synthetic heroines and so on. And, of course, they were addictive. And, of course, they were overprescribed kind of dramatically. In fact, when all of this was going on, a couple of things happened. If you were a doctor and you were prescribing pain meds, or if you had a patient who was hurt, you would literally hear from these manufacturers that you're kind of a jerk if you won't prescribe OxyContin for this person. So anyway, OxyContin got overprescribed to the point that in West Virginia, which was hit even harder, West Virginia was hit even harder than Kentucky. They got to a point where there were enough painkillers prescribed that every man, woman, and child in the state of West Virginia would have gotten 150 of them or something crazy like that. They had 2 pharmacies in one little town of 3,000 people that sold enough for millions of people. So it was completely out of control. And then, of course, by the time the federal government did something about it, they restricted the use of these, and then people who really needed the drugs were in a very difficult situation. And I know someone who had had back surgery and couldn't get the medications that he needed, so it was handled poorly. In all of this, we had people who were getting addicted. And sometimes people who are addicted do things, they break the law, and they end up going to prison. And fair enough. If you're high or not, but you break into someone's house, or you steal a car, or you break into a shop, you should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But then what happens is they're let out of prison on probation, and they maybe get pulled over by police for a broken taillight, and they give them a blood test or a breath test, and if they find out that they've been using drugs, they go straight back to go straight back to prison, which is not correct. And that is one of the things I believe is we have to decriminalize addiction. That doesn't mean if they commit a crime that they shouldn't have to pay the price for committing the crime. But if all they've done is get pulled over and be, found to have been high, in other words, there's a trace residue. They're not high right now, but there's a residue of whatever supplement it was. That they shouldn't go straight to prison. And that's one of the ways we can do this. Another way, Jonathan says Purdue invested in rehab centers. It's absolutely diabolical. You're absolutely right. They also invested in a new drug or a new classification of drugs that helps you get clear of the very drug they addicted you with. And I've heard several times, by the way, the story of people who someone in their family was prescribed Oxy for some sort of pain, and fairly quickly they got addicted. And one of them was a family that had a daughter who was summa cum laude at University of Louisville, and she had fallen off of a porch and hurt her hip. They prescribed her. She got addicted. She now lives on the street. She's unapproachable by her family, and just a complete mess, and I hope she's still alive. Another person I spoke with told me that she and her husband both had good jobs. Her husband got hurt on the job, prescribed OxyContin, and then could never get off of it. And finally she moved out with the children, and within a year he was dead from an overdose. And this was because he was prescribed a drug that was inappropriate. This also, I guess, relates to making cannabis legal, because states with legalized cannabis have much lower use and much less overdose and much less death by painkillers. So this is one of the pieces of the Contract for Rural America. We must find ways to support families that have an addict in their family. If you've got an addict in your family, you already know it's more than your family can handle in most cases. Even the very wealthiest families that I've known that had family members that were addicted, money is not enough. And I have a friend who lost a child even after spending tens of thousands of dollars on rehab. There's a lot more to say about this, but the basic idea is that we need to decriminalize addiction. We need to send people to rehab. If you get pulled over and they figure out you've been high, you go to rehab. Okay, we also need support for the families. And this is a very complex problem, and addiction is very complex. And it'll be one of those things that'll have to be attacked from several directions. So that's why that's important. Now, by the way, Mary says, is it true West Virginia has quite a large drug overdose problem? Now, the way that they measure this, and I haven't looked at it for a while, is deaths per 1 million, okay? And I believe that West Virginia was the highest at the time that I looked, and they had something like 347 deaths per million. Kentucky was pretty high. They were at around 275. California, by comparison, was around 110 per million, but California is a state where cannabis is legal, so there's less reason to use OxyContin, and a lot of people use marijuana for pain, for chronic pain. So yes, West Virginia had a terrible, terrible time. So we're going to be talking more and more about the contract, and here it is again. Mary has a problem with, she said she's not sure about rebuilding America's infrastructure and domestic supply chain. Well, what that is about is that we can no longer make electronic components, for example, that are needed in equipment for our military. So there are critical pieces that are part of our defense that are being made in China, and there's no replacement for it. I'm friends with the owner of a company that makes recording equipment, and they told me that they assemble in the United States, and they buy every component they can from the United States, but there's some components that simply aren't available anywhere but China. And that needs to change. So that's related to our domestic supply chain. There are certain things that we cannot allow other nations to make for us. So in my mind, that's electronic components, that especially with a defense connection. But I also think we need to get back to manufacturing. The wave of globalism that occurred in the 90s and is still continuing forced American workers to compete with workers in other nations where the rate of pay was much lower. Now, we were told that this would raise wages in these other nations and it wouldn't cost us jobs. Well, it didn't do either of those things. It cost us plenty of jobs, and the workers in the rest of the world are still not being paid very much. All it did was make the owners of these corporations more and more and more wealthy. And since we've been saying all along, it's the inequality that matters, and economic inequality really needs to be addressed. Our working people need to be paid much, much more. All right, so Mary agrees. And our infrastructure, in Kentucky we have pretty good infrastructure, but the rest of the country doesn't have really good infrastructure. So there's so much we need to rebuild. We've got bridges and highways and airports. If you travel, it's been a while since any of us have traveled, but if you've traveled to other countries, you see really incredible modern airports, and you see virtually nothing like that in the United States. So things like that. And this, by the way, is a way that we got out of the Depression with the WPA. We put Americans to work rebuilding the country. That's when we rebuilt and even expanded our national park system. We built airports, we built schools, we built swimming pools, we did all kinds of things. So that's the idea of that. So Mary, as we said, you were requesting a song, so I have a song, if you all can bear it. And I expect it's one you know. So here we go. And thank you all for being here. Remember, please, to share, and let's get this message spread around. Remember, you got to register to vote. I'm going to put that back up right now, because if you're a Kentuckian, you need to register for your absentee voting. Right now, you need to do that, because today's your last chance. Okay, so I'm going back to, where's my main? There I am. You'll know this song. Oh, beautiful for patriots' dream that sees beyond the years, thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed her grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for those who came, adventurer and slave, to build a home where freedom rings, land of the free and brave. America, America, God mend thine every flaw, confirm our souls in self-control, our liberty in law. from sea to shining sea. All right, I'll see you all tomorrow. I love you. Thank you for being here. Let's fade out on the contract. Love you all. Y'all take care.